chemistry is literally everything. There would be nothing without chemistry. When I give my talks and stuff about metallomics, I literally just put the periodic table, like the fundamental building blocks of life.
Science. Technology. Medicine. Health. These four things make the world go round. Without them, we couldn't exist. This is the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health, answering your questions or finding experts in the field to answer them. Your host is a pharmacist, an award-winning scientist. She leads her own research group and is the founder of King's College London Fight the Fakes. A tad bit on the qualified side. Welcome to Monday Science. Here's your host, Dr. Bahijja Abraham.
I find your career path interesting. I hope you don't take offense with what I'm about to say. When I've interacted with people who have ended up going down more a facilities role, they sometimes become a bit jaded about academia, and it's like, oh, I just do this just to pay the bills and do. Again, another thing that I was like, oh, okay, you're very happy, you're very passionate, which respectfully is not that it's not common. When people look at careers within academia that is not a lectureship, a fellow, there is sometimes this perception that a facilities related role is the end of your academic career. Is that something you reflected on before you, and also how have you been able to turn that?
Yeah, sure. So I think after my PhD, you face that crisis of like, what am I doing with my life? And I've actually been talking to one of my staff about this recently. And, I realized, okay, postdoc, and you begin to feel like there's this mapped out route that if you want to stay in academia, and, you need to do your postdocing, and then you find a lectureship position and start to build your research group, you need to find your niche and right? Publications, beef up your CV. And I just looked at all of that and I was like, oh God, it does not really feel like something that I want to do. And I, looking at all these PIs and how stressed they are all the time trying to get funding. And I was just like, I want to do science. Like, I love what I'm doing. I think metals and everything is really fascinating. There's potential, but I don't want to do that. So I accepted this position originally. This was a research fellow position that they offered me. So it was essentially a high-level postdoc in the beginning. And then, I had a conversation with Phil Blower, and there really was that point of, what do you want to do? Like, because he was supporting me to do a lectureship position and kind of be the new face of metallomics in academia at King's. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I really like being in a position where I can interact with so many diverse projects every single day and see connections and help people make their own research even better. How can I help them make the connections that necessarily see yet for themselves? And I just found that to be so much more exciting and rewarding, and being able to work with instrument companies and develop new technology, because that's what really drives science forward, is when there's new technology that opens doors that you can do things that you haven't done before, the how, right? And so it was just, that part was exciting for me. And then not having to think about writing grants, and, I have to think about other things. Obviously, it's more of like a entrepreneur business, small business, about income and all that stuff. And that's been a learning curve for me. But I actually really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to becoming a facilities manager. But I think I didn't let the word manager suck me down into this hole that you're talking about, because, I was called the manager, but then I, threw in lead scientist and manager, because that's what I always really felt like I was. And always driving and developing and evolving the facility, and, getting put on grants, pushing the field forward. That's really what I saw my role of in the beginning. So I think it's the perception, and I think I actually personally feel like all core facilities should have this dynamic where you have an element of core service that's routine, that you know what you're doing, but you're also very much pushing the technology within your respective field to be able to offer the most cutting edge services to all types of users. And that's just kind of my perspective on the position.
Yeah, I like to give, not saying you gave yourself a title, but there's a point where, no, because I do that as well. Sometimes you have to, because if you were to be the title of the role that you have, as you rightfully said, it will suck you in, and then you become defined by that. And that's what I see a lot of the time. And so again, need for that visibility, for examples of people who've gone into roles such as yourself, and going into sort of the facility management role, but lead scientist. It doesn't have to be the end of a career. That's how a lot of people do perceive it. But yeah, I don't. Oh, I remember it was during my PhD. No, I was writing up, and that's when I actually started my consultancy. I got into the world of consultancy during my PhD, and I was doing some consultancy work for someone, and I signed the email, Joe Remy Abraham, PhD student. He was like, no, you can't call yourself a PhD student. And I said, oh, but I am. He said, no, because you're dealing with companies, so you have to say PhD researcher. So I said, oh, okay. Then he said, but also you can't just sign it off as PhD researcher, because they'll think that you're just my PhD researcher, and I'm not. So I want you to put that you're doing PhD because it looks good, but then what is your job title? I said, what? Then I asked him, I was like, what is my job title? He's like, no, what is your, I know we had this back and forth of, no, what is your job? Oh, okay. And that's when I learned that actually reflect on, yes, you might have your job, but what are you doing? And how is that portrayed to others? I just want to ask a couple more questions about the LMF, and then I want to talk about your new role that's coming up. What was the biggest challenge setting up the LMF?
So many. I mean, I transitioned the LMF from, kind of an operation literally into an autonomous core facility. So obviously that involved a lot of interaction with upper level management and being able to convince Kings that this is definitely worthwhile as an autonomous entity unto itself. But I think the hardest thing was in the beginning not having the adequate support with respect to staffing and infrastructure. I was literally doing everything. I was a technician, I was procurement, I was ordering lasers, not knowing anything about lasers. I was learning how to do the laser ablation, the elemental imaging. I was promoting the field of metal. I was doing literally everything probably for the first couple of years. And it's only been the last, I would say, 2.5 years or so where, there's been more incremental support. Obviously Kings began to recognize that there's potential in this. To their credit, obviously, they got staffing, and now I have 2 fixed positions of staff. We were in what I called my Harry Potter closet.
Are you still in that Harry Potter closet?
Budget for refurb, you'll show you tomorrow. So to half of the mass spec facility, huge. It was 12 square meters and all these instruments. It was a Tetris game. So
it was quite warm as well.
It's safety. They know, they came in, they just were like, we didn't see any of this. It was those kinds of obstacles to overcome, because I had such a strong vision, such a strong drive in seeing what the potential was in this. And so I would be at work till 1 a.m. finishing work, lasering overnight. And I look back and it was crazy, but that's what was driving me. So that was probably the most difficult thing, was just like seeing what I knew was possible and seeing where I was at that time point was incredibly challenging at some times. And I think that's kind of a message for everyone. Hold on very clearly to that vision and never second guess despite what the current circumstances are, because if you have that and that's powerful and you feel it, it will happen. Just take it like almost moment by moment. Sometimes I remember there's one time I never cried. There's one time though, it was like 9 o'clock at night, everything was going to crap, and I closed the door, I locked the office, I sobbed for 30 seconds and I was like, pull yourself together, and then I kept going. And I think other than that, it was just it's that endurance. But now it's literally everything is coming to fruition. The momentum is there, the support at Kings is really coming on board, and it's fun and exciting, and it's what I've always seen as possible, and just becoming more and more and more. So that was probably the most challenging thing, was to deal with that temporary period of just oh my god, look at this is the LMF, this is not this is not what I see. But now it's kind of starting to come to fruition.
You've dropped so many gems in that. I remember getting emails from you at midnight. I was like, why is she sending me this time of day? I don't know what's going on. Journey to greatness is hard, and especially when you're going against the grain. It's easy when you're following a path that is already laid out, but when you're carving out a new path and you have a vision of where it's possible, the limitation is not even in the imagination. The limitation is in getting there and getting everybody else on board and being patient. It's inspiring, because you sometimes, in the midst of difficulty, you can forget that it can actually be temporary. It's not trying to say, you should stay in something negative, but there are points where something is happening that is a necessity for a bigger thing.
Yeah, exactly. And this point has been brought to me by, a couple people that I know closely. They're saying, just leave. Like, why are you in London? Like, you're so unhappy. Like, why don't you just like go off into the mountains? And, I'm like, but no, you don't understand like what's developing. It's meant to happen. It's happening now. This is worth it. Like, yes, I look miserable right now. Okay. Like, I'm not a happy camper. I will admit it. But no, I'm not going to just leave it and drop everything, because it's the long term. It's the long term that matters. And I think, first of all, if something doesn't, I think we talked about this before, if something doesn't completely freak you out a little bit, not big enough. That's always been a sign that I'm doing the right thing. If I'm a bit like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? And then second of all, if it's difficult, then it's worth doing. And like you're saying, it's not something that like you should be miserable and unhappy. And that difficulty and struggle is something different. But coming up against resistance, that means that like you're actually doing something meaningful and important, because you're going against the grain and you're contributing something, and it's not supposed to be easy. And in that process, you actually find a strength in yourself that you never knew existed, and it solidifies you as a human being. And then you begin to realize that you can do anything. You have everything that it needs to take. Nothing will ever come from the surface. And that's what I've come to recognize over the last several years, is that we all have everything that we need, even though we don't believe it. There's nothing external to us. There's nothing on the surface that is going to give us something that we don't already have. It's about recognizing what we do have, which is a process, not easy, and then acting from that. And no matter what you do in your life, you will be successful.
What's the future of the LMF? What's the next step? What's the next big thing we've got to look forward to?
There's been a lot of reshuffling right now. So I was recently and I'm moving into a new role at King's College, into business development manager of the Research Management Innovation Directorate, RMID. Basically taking the natural skills that I've used at the LMF to develop it. I'm still working very much with the LMF, but stepping a little bit more away from the day-to-day operational level and looking more about, how can we start to facilitate more external income and interactions and networking with the LMF, what I've been doing already. But more importantly, how can I extend that to the other core facilities at King's College and really make what's needed is like a more solidified, integrated network of core facilities that King's users can use, that presents a more, like, how do I want to say this, integrated face and easy accessibility and cohesiveness between the core facilities. So that's going to be my new role going forward, which I'm really excited about. I think it's very much needed at King's. I think I can take what I've done at the LMF with that. So that will be kind of my new role going forward, which now, gives an incredible opportunity to hire in some more staff at the LMF. And we're going to be doing a restructuring, looking to, in terms of next steps, in terms of the analytics, what we're wanting to do. I'm getting in new technology where we can look at the entire periodic table, boom, all at once. So true metallomics mapping. There's a brand new laser that we're going to be getting. So there's a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline for all this cool imaging stuff.
Oh, very excited to hear. I've got an upcoming meeting with your team actually for some work with my PhD research. I'm very excited because, we had our work that we did a couple of years ago. That's been good to help understand what's possible now. So I'm hoping that we'll be in a good position. Sounds exciting, especially being able to map the whole periodic table.
Yeah, this is very exciting. So we're going to be able to send some samples to get some tests probably by November or so. But there's massive potential, so I'm excited about that. And we actually, with Maddie Parsons, we got this massive $7.1 million grant through the Welcome Leap initiative, the Tissue Delta project. So we're going to be looking at understanding the progression of triple negative breast cancer. And this is the first time elemental bioimaging and metallomics has now literally been slotted into a whole kind of multimodal imaging suite within the context of cancer. So from a scientific perspective, the next few years are going to be super exciting because I'm really anticipating us discovering a lot of kind of novel aspects to this.
Amazing. And so with your new role, will you still get to do much science? Is that something you're going to miss if you're not?
I think obviously I won't be as involved on the day-to-day level in terms of lasering and projects and interacting with users at the LMF, and not listed as like on grants. So I think there probably will be an aspect where I feel, a greater distance from that. My staff probably already know that I'm going to like be calling them any cool projects are coming in. But I think as a business development manager role, you're still needing to understand the science that's going on if you're wanting to even develop it and to get, external people using facilities or, looking at new applications or enough potential. So in that sense, I'll still be very much connected with, I think, the bigger picture of the scientific questions being asked. And I think that's always what's been most interesting for me anyway, and how can I enable new connections to make that science progress even faster and more effectively.
You started off your career on your academic journey, music, creativity, chemistry. Do you still identify as a chemist now for the Royal Society of Chemistry?
Yeah. Chemistry is literally everything. There would be nothing without chemistry. And it, when I give my talks and stuff about metallomics, I literally just put the periodic table, like the fundamental building blocks of life. It's something that we're so familiar with. Oh yeah, like school. It blows me away when you think about the complex interactions of these elements lead to this and lead to what we're doing now and lead to life and and so basically with metallomics, breaking it down to like understanding the role of those fundamental building blocks and what we can do to analyze and understand them. So yeah, chemistry is literally everything. And so do I consider myself a chemist person? And I think it comes back to this discussion that we had about being creative and being able to see the connections and interrelationships of many different things. And I think I see myself as a human being who has done science, who is really curious and engaged in wanting to understand how the world and nature works. And I've been fortunate to study chemistry, which is what I feel like is really the foundation of understanding a lot of interactions of everything, and being able to use my experiences through chemistry and all of the tools that I've learned to be able to then begin to look at these connections in very different kinds of ways. So I guess in a certain way, like in the most essential aspect, I'm a chemist because I'm looking at everything. But I really want to emphasize, like, we need to start moving away from like, I'm a biologist, I'm a chemist, I'm a physicist, because that is what is killing science. It's killing us right now. It's just killing us as humanity. We separate, we divide, we see things in pieces, we don't see things connected. And the reality is that everything is connected. Whether we see it or not doesn't mean that it's not. And I think that's kind of the most important thing, is that there's so much there to be seen. We just need to open up our eyes. And
well, it's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Monday Science. Before you go, share with us any key take-home messages.
I think I've dropped a lot of those things actually just in the context of what we're talking about. But again, the thing that's been the most meaningful and rewarding for me in this whole journey is seeing connections and connecting dots where nobody else has seen them before. And that's where I feel like I have the most impact in what I'm doing. To be like, oh, you see this, this, and this? Like, oh, go. Like, so you see that, and that, go, and being a master integrator within the context of a master integrating field. And so I think that's just my message for everybody out there, is like, that is the most important thing, is like, look at connections, look at things in an integrated way, move away from just that exclusive way of concentrating on one thing, and kind of, I call it like a multiple and inclusive approach to looking at science. You can be good at many things at the same time. Science and music, chemistry and biology and physics, we're whole human beings, and we should take the same approach to what we do in life.
You've been listening to the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health. We hope you've gotten some useful and thought-provoking info from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on our website at www.mondaysciencepodcast.com. Shoot us an email at info@mondaysciencepodcast.com. Find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Monday Science, and access episode summaries at mondayscience.medium.com. See you next week on the Monday Science Podcast.